Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. This video will post on November 1st, and that marks the start of a booktube event. Now, I'm not speaking about Nonfiction November, which is an event started by Olive at a Book Olive, though I will put information for that in the description, because there could be some overlap here. So it might as well apply to that, at least in my case. No, I am talking about an event called the Great War November. Well, actually World War November, but I like the title Great War November since that First World War was so designated. Now this event is an event which is encouraging people to read things related to the First World War throughout the month of November. And that can be fiction, that can be nonfiction, that can be poetry. In my case, I have opted for some nonfiction, and so in my case, it will apply to both World War November and nonfiction November. Now, the event World War November has a large group of hosts. I believe it was started by Tristan at Tristan and the Classics and Christy Luis at Dostoevsky in Space, and then they enlisted some other co-hosts. So you've got Peg at the History Shelf, Chelsea at Voyage of a Time Wanderer, and Bill Rutenberg, which I believe his is called the Rutenberg Library. So they are all co-hosting, and I will put links also in the description, if not to every single host's announcement video, at least to their channel, and at least to one or two announcement videos, so that you can get a better idea of what possibly your options are if you wish to participate. I am sure that it only requires you to read one such book if you want to do it minimally. Now, for me, there's nothing that I feel really compelled to read about the First World War anymore, having read in the past Wilfred Owen and other of the First World War poets. And for me, that really is enough. But, of course, there are extenuating circumstances. Now, I used to be a writer. I would write poems and plays. And my plays were, for the most part, comedies, but I did one that was a historical drama, I guess you would say, a history play. And there were 3 other history plays that I had intentions of writing, possibly even a 4th, but I don't remember it. And I failed in all 3 attempts because all of them required a lot of research and reading, and my reading skills back then were not up to the task. In fact, they are probably still not up to the task, but I have since crossed over a line to a phase in my life where I don't foresee that I will be writing plays regardless. Now, in the build up to these projects, I would find myself collecting the books that I felt I needed for research. So in some cases, I have a voluminous selection of books pertaining to the subject that now are of little use to me, but on the other hand, I don't feel like discarding them because I went through all of the trouble to find them. So one of those projects was not First World War related per se, but possibly somewhat adjacent. It was a a play that I intended to write pertaining to the Congo, and one of the books, well, actually two of the books that I'm going to show you are written by a man with some history in the Congo. So if you have read, what's his name? Adam Hochschild's King Leopold's Ghost, you will have had the introduction to ED Morel, or Morel is the surname. I forget what was his nation of origin, France or Belgium perhaps, but he was English. And he was the person responsible for blowing the whistle on King Leopold's Congo Free State. He just happened to be at the dock one day and noticed that all of the trading ships came back from the Congo with all kinds of goods, but then on their return trip to the Congo, they carried nothing. And so that did not sit well with him. He investigated, he found out what was going on, and then when he found out what was going on, he dedicated his life to stopping it. Eventually, he succeeded, and the Congo Free State as such was dissolved. That did not, of course, make everything all rosy in the Congo. But when he had fulfilled that mission, he quit that and became something of a public man, I guess. He ran for political office and won. I don't remember the details very well, but he also published. So one of the books which I picked up in preparation for this play, which never got written, was a book by ED Morel titled Truth and the War. I don't know if you can see that. I'll take it out of the plastic in a minute. I've had it for I don't know how long, 10 or 15 years, and it's never been out of the plastic. So I will do that. Now, while I was digging this out from its spot in the basement, I came across a book next to it. Alas, not in as good a shape. And this one never had a bag, and I left it without a bag. 10 Years of Secret Diplomacy, an Unheeded Warning. Lovely cover. I'm sorry that the corner was taken off. And so I glanced into this, and it turns out that the 10 years of secret diplomacy, now I will read you a little portion of this because things don't stick in my mind that very well. And but what I read, I think it indicated that Morel was upset about 10 years of secret diplomacy between Britain and France. So they had one set of public proclamations that they made, and all of this, I believe, was somehow pertaining to Morocco. But in private, they had another set of principles that they adhered to, unbeknownst to the world at large, unbeknownst to the public, and unbeknownst to Germany. So Morel places the blame for the start of the Great War at the feet of these two countries because of their secret actions in concert. So let me see if I can read you the introduction. It's a foreword by J. Ramsay MacDonald, MP. I remember well the unpleasant effect this book had upon me when I first read it over 2 years ago. I did not want to believe it, and yet its facts were so authoritative and its conclusions so logical that I had to believe it. No more merciless exposure of the dishonor which is accepted as honor in diplomatic circles has ever been made. It is all ancient history now, it may be said. We have our Egypt and France has her Morocco, and the end has justified the means. But the fact is that the events and the policy exposed in this book form an introduction to the present war. The Morocco affair slammed the doors in the faces of the peacemakers in Europe. I wrote at the time that it looked as though we had ended the policy of French pinpricks in Egypt at the price of an enormous navy in the North Sea and an ultimate war. The Morocco experience had a most unfortunate influence on the mind of Germany. It convinced many of my own socialist friends, particularly those of the revisionist school who concern themselves more than the others with real politics, that Germany was the victim of an evil conspiracy and that our friendship was merely feigned. And it is also said with some show of authority that our readiness to go to war in support of the French claims in Morocco, though they were in violation of a treaty only a year or so old and in contradiction of our openly professed intentions, though not of our secretly made agreements, convinced the Kaiser that sooner or later he would have to yield to the militarist advisors to whom he had hitherto lent but a deaf ear. In any event, 1911 to 1912 are the years of the diplomatic changes which immediately preceded the war. Then fate became mischievous and malevolent, and even those who were but onlookers could not help seeing the gathering of the clouds on the horizon. This book explains those years, and the most strikingly dramatic part of its revelation is that the agreements we made with France openly were good and made for peace, whilst those we made secretly were the cause of trouble, ill-feeling, and war. This is a most significant circumstance and has an important bearing on the demand of growing strength that secret diplomacy should be done away with. Mr. Morel has written a history with a merciless accuracy. It ought to be read by everyone who is thinking of what the settlement after peace can be, for it reveals a method of government which is as inconsistent with and as subversive to democracy and popular freedom as Prussian militarism itself. That's quite a strenuous foreword. I have read one and possibly two books by ED Morel. The one I remember, the other I don't, so I'm not so sure. And his writing style is not easy, at least was not easy for me. And I think you can get a sense from that introduction that there is going to be references to all kinds of things that I know nothing about and any common reader of today would know nothing about. Nevertheless, given that E.D. Morel is, I don't know if the, but one of the preeminent voices, the preeminent moral voice of the previous century, let me say, I am willing to give his view the benefit of the doubt and try to take a stab at understanding what he was talking about in terms of the secret diplomacy over Morocco, which led to the war. I have trust in him, even though I'm not sure that I can comprehend. So let me open up Truth and the War so that you can get a good glimpse of the cover. Now, for me, this nonfiction November may well be stretched into 2 months. I've started last month on The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan, and I am making a slow crawl through the book. So between these 3 books, I don't know if I will finish in November or not. It looks like it has a little wine stain on there. Those were not from me, but another lovely cover, Truth and the War. Let me just take a look and see what... Okay, guys. Well, let me read you the introduction by Philip Snowden, MP. I have not read this, so I may stumble through it a bit. Truth, it has been said, is the first casualty of war. When hostilities break out, the one object of each belligerent nation is victory. All is fair in war, and to secure and maintain national unity in support of the war, every means are taken by the respective governments to suppress criticism which, however honest and true, may be thought by them to be calculated to create a doubt as to the wholly disinterested and blameless position of their own country. It becomes a most unpatriotic act to continue to hold and to express opinions about the foreign policy of the statesmen of one's own country, which have been held and proclaimed for years before the war by large bodies of men and women, and which were then regarded as perfectly reasonable and useful criticism. This suppression of the truth during a war is justified as being in the interests of one's own country. The test of a person's patriotism is willingness to subscribe to the declaration, "My country, right or wrong." Patriotism within the limits of morality is a noble sentiment. But, as John Bright said in one of his finest passages, the moral law was not written for individuals only, but for nations, and for nations as great as we are. When patriotism leads men and nations to ignore facts and to refuse to hear or acknowledge the truth, it becomes a sin for which the penalty will certainly sooner or later have to be paid. Lord Hugh Cecil recently wrote, "Mankind has suffered the prodigious evils the war has brought upon us, mainly because human beings in general, and especially Germans, have come to love their countries more than they ought to, more than they love God and his laws." There have been a few people in all the belligerent countries who have refused to forswear the principles they have held and proclaimed in times of peace, and who, when their prophecies have been fulfilled, have refused to deny that they ever made them. If there has been in the past foreign policy of this country, as well as in the foreign policies of other nations, something wrong which has contributed to the present war, then it will be fatal for the future peace of Europe not to admit that truth. If another war is to be averted, there will have to be a thorough searching out of all the causes of this war with the object of removing them. If a perverted patriotism is to be allowed to blind the people of any country to the mistakes or sins of their own governments, then the likelihood of a permanent peace is very remote. Among the men who have kept the impartial and judicial mind during these awful days since August 1914, none has rendered greater service to the future of peace and internationalism than the writer of this volume. I do not expect that his attitude can be generally approved now, nor the value of his work appreciated, but time will do justice to both. There is a certain type of very limited mental development which has not learnt that there are more numerals than two. If a word of criticism of the policy of one's own country is put forward, such persons immediately jump to the conclusion that the critic is the friend of every other nation, and that the object of his criticism is to condemn his own country and to defend all others. Criticism of the policy of statesmen is the highest patriotism, for it is aimed at removing those mistakes which detract from the reputation of our own country abroad and the well-being of our own people at home. That is the spirit in which this book has been written. It has been written not in the interests of the enemy, but in the interests of Great Britain. At a time when the public mind was calm and so free from passion as to be able to take an impartial view of international policy and problems, the writer's past work for oppressed peoples and his great knowledge of and authority on international questions would have secured him a wide and respectful hearing. I write these few words of introduction to beseech for the book such a reception in these troublous times. The matters with which it deals are of the most vital importance. Without a popular knowledge of these facts, it will be impossible for the people of this country to take an intelligent part in the settlement of the war. We do not ask for the endorsement of all that is said in this volume. Let the statements stand upon their merits. Many parts of the book have already been before the public for some time. So far as I know, the facts have never been challenged. But where there are such tremendous issues involved, it is surely in the interests of truth that there should be full and free discussion, and that every side of the question should be stated and discussed. It is only by such full and frank discussion that we can hope to obtain a settlement after this war, which will be permanent, because it is based upon truth. And I am not sure what the date on this is. Let me see, is there 1916, so it was just relatively shortly after the previous book. So my goal is to read both of these books. This one is shorter. I think it's 100, I don't know, 150, 180 pages, and this one is bigger. But I will attempt to do both of them. I believe that the word of truth deserves a hearing. Certain lies get covered over, and then they become something of the next generation's putative truths, if you will. Taking the Congo, for example, all these years later, we still know nothing of who was responsible for what seemed to be the shooting down of the plane of Dag Hammarskjöld. These fictions persist, and I, for one, don't like being lied to, be it my own government or my own media. And so, as I understand that a lot of the history that I was taught in school, and that many of us have been taught in school, was in some cases outright falsehood, and in other cases just fanciful distortion. Regardless that I will not be writing a play, I want to use the occasion of Great War November or World War November to try to delve a little bit into the truth and the war. Excuse me. Back in the day that I bought these books, I don't believe anything of this sort was available online. I am sure that there are online copies of both of these readily accessible. And indeed, if I find a good one, in the case of this, I may read it in the online version. This book, despite its worse-looking shape, actually feels in better condition. The binding, this one feels almost as though it might fall apart if I am even remotely hard on it. Now, while I was just opening this, as I say, I had not opened this book previously, I see that there is a personal foreword here written by ED Morel, I presume, yep. And he mentions Ramsay MacDonald in the first paragraph. So I will just read a little bit of that and see where it gets me. Personal foreword. During the past 12 months, I have been one of the best abused men in the British Isles. Not even my friend and colleague, Mr. J. Ramsay MacDonald, has had to endure such malignant misrepresentation. No dishonor too profound, no motive too base, but has been attributed to me. I will leave that there. As I say, Morel is one of the great voices, if not the greatest moral voice of the previous century, one of the great moral voices of the previous century, and I intend to give him a hearing. And I had not originally intended to do this until the idea behind World War November was announced, and then I thought, well, it is time. We have a war going on in Gaza, which is threatening to expand into a huge conflagration with lies being told, lies of contemporary events I don't pretend to be able to delve into, but I'm going to give this a hearing. Incidentally, I mentioned Adam Hochschild. He has a book pertaining to the First World War, and this is one of those books that I believe I read, and I have absolutely no memory of it. I checked in the index, and ED Morel is mentioned in there, but it went over my head. So I'm going to go to the source, even though it is difficult. It does not by any means focus on the man, but for some reason, if I read this book, it's completely gone, unlike his other books that I've read, King Leopold's Ghost and Bury the Chains, an excellent book about the abolition campaign against slavery. Those have all remained in me, so it's possible that I didn't read this, but I'm fairly convinced that I have read this. And so if I make it through these and am still breathing at the end, perhaps I will give this a go, but I am not going to make any promises. I have something else on the docket for reread December. I'm not sure the exact title, but I will try to put something out perhaps tomorrow about that. In the meantime, I've got to get back to this, which I am enjoying more than I was. It's still a hard read, so it's taken me quite a while to get 200 pages in. I have 300 pages to go, and I believe I will be proceeding at a faster clip unless life intervenes. I will leave it there. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.